The year was 2010, and I was just getting to know a man named Lou Engle. He called me in. He was going to preach at a large gathering, and he said, Dean, I just felt moved of the Lord to ask you to do a fresh exploration of the passage in Matthew 16 where Jesus promised to build his church. So I did. Now, I had planted and pastored a church for 11 years. I had taught on what church was and how it came from the word Ekklesia and the stuff that we've all heard before and been taught by others, but I was not prepared for what I found. 2010 was a watershed moment in my own life. For 6 weeks, I wrote that book in 6 weeks. I'm not an early riser. I was up at 5:30 every morning, wrote till 10, 11, 12 at night. I researched, I wrote day after day for 6 weeks. It was like being hooked up to 220 volts. I've never had a period of such floodgates of revelation opening as I saw things I had never seen and realized things in the Word, in history, in what Jesus said in red, and he meant in red, that has been accepted over time in a watered-down version, a known mistranslation. The word church does not come from the word ekklesia. The word church is a Middle Greek term, comes from a Middle Greek word that wasn't even present in the time of biblical Koine Greek. And so you can look up in any English dictionary, look up the word church, and it'll give you a derivation through German and Latin of circe all the way back to kyriakon, not the word ekklesia. But they were generally considered to be an assembly, and that was close enough. And so it was a known mistranslation required by King James because of the political pressure he was under to govern the church in a time of massive upheaval during the Reformation. There's all kinds of reasons to understand and explain it, but the fact is we have built hundreds of years of church culture, and the Lord is doing a revolution in the earth right now, building for the last 10 plus years, and it's happening everywhere. Everywhere I go, people are talking ekklesia, 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 and it's coming out of this idea that the word itself in the time of Jesus meant the ruling council of a city. And that doesn't mean a political power, but it does mean a spiritual force that understands they have jurisdictional authority through agreement, community, intercession, and prayer to determine the spiritual climate of their surroundings. And this is far more robust, far more potent, far more aggressive. It takes 2 or 3. It takes agreement. But when we do that, we bind and loose. We have revelation of Jesus, and the gates of Hades won't prevail. Well, we see the gates of Hades prevailing all over culture because we built what we thought Jesus said, which was the mistranslated word of church. I pastored a church. I grew up in the church. I love the church. Church is good at many things, but church does not by default have an ekklesia mindset, and that's what's changing. The Lord is in the process of raising up entrepreneurs, marketplace leaders, visionaries, apostolic, prophetic, pastoral teaching gifts who carry not just an expansion of the church model, but an ekklesia mandate to shape history through prayer, to shape history through discipling of nations. And so there's a new thing rising. I wrote the book in 2010. Lou asked me to do that word study. I had no idea what was going to come out of it. But I wrote that book and I sat on it for 4 years. I didn't even publish it until 2014. And then I just kind of let it float. And I didn't know what to do. And I was uncomfortable with trying to promote it. And I just said, God, if you want this to fly, you're going to have to make it fly. And under the surface, I didn't even know for the first 2 or 3 years. But then in 2017, I'm sitting at a table and someone strikes up a conversation about ekklesia. And that wasn't a word that was commonly used over the last few years. It's only recently that people are talking ekklesia. And they said, I said, where did you get that word and that concept? They said, well, we were reading this book called Ekklesia Rising by Dean Briggs. I said, I'm Dean Briggs. We talked. And then I found out more and more. And nations started to open. I just came back from the island nation of Sri Lanka, where a major denomination there is planting 5,000 ekklesias over the next 10 years. It's a church planting evangelism strategy. But when they got the vision of ekklesia, because they had come to India. A couple years prior, I was in Chennai, India, teaching pastors and leaders there about Ekklesia. And the vice chair of the denomination in Sri Lanka heard that and said, we can't just have another church planting movement. The models are broken and we are not affecting culture. In their own nation, it's still under 2% Christian and it's a Buddhist stronghold. And there's all kinds of reasons that the government is resisting church expansion, but they can move into homes with an Ekklesia mindset and pray effectively and exert spiritual authority through intercession. So Taiwan, Hong Kong, Australia, Europe, South America, all of these nations are having an Ekklesia conversation right now. There's a reformation happening in the earth that I believe it's hard to see because we're at the very beginning of it. But this is, the last 5 years are roughly like October of 1517 with Martin Luther. There's a manifesto hanging on the door of the church that says the Ekklesia is rising. And all of the church infrastructure now exists potentially beneficially with strength and resources, all of the things the church is good at in caring for one another, in community outreach, in worship and teaching. But there is a more militant sense of intercession and ownership of our spheres of authority and the ancient gods that are reinvading culture. And as in the days of Deborah, when the old gods came, there was war in the gates. And she says, and I, Deborah, arose. These are days that men and women are rising with an Ekklesia mindset to challenge the powers in the gates and to know how to plant small, effective outposts. And it all started, at least for me, in terms of receiving this revelation and helping be a voice for it. It started in 2010, 14 short years later, just 10 years after publication. This word is spreading all over the earth. Nations are opening. An Embassy Ekklesia Leadership Academy is about raising up a new generation of leaders to carry this message, this mobilization, this new wineskin. It's an ancient truth and a well-worn path that is overgrown with weeds and forgotten by neglect. We actually aren't doing something new, but there is New Testament Christianity that is raw and primal, that doesn't care a lick about celebrity platforms, superstardom. We want to get the work of the kingdom done. He said, occupy till I come. And there is a king whose son, Psalm 72 says, has dominion from the river to the ends of the earth. That means his dominion is total. And total dominion means no part of the territory of planet Earth is outside of his eventual control. And it is the privilege of the Ekklesia to win back contested territory, to deliver eviction notices to squatter principalities and powers that have been allowed to remain and resist, even though they have been defeated. It is the privilege of the Ekklesia to enforce their defeat in prayer, pull down those strongholds, and see dark, contested, hard, gospel-less places where eyes are blinded by the prince of the power of the air and see those eyes open. That the God of this world who has blinded the mind of unbelievers would be pulled down in all of his lies, his deception, pretender status that he occupies when we have been seated with Christ. All authority has been given to me, he said. Therefore, go and make disciples of nations. There's nothing outside of that commission, and the Ekklesia is the building branch of the kingdom of God. And it's time we begin to think Ekklesia, not just church. And that's what we're going to do. March 9th, it starts.